Okay. Well, I'd like to say good afternoon and welcome to all of our participants and panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today as we discuss the role of faith-based organizations in health promotion. I wanted to give a special thanks to my partner in Champion, Ms. Anita Parker, the Community Outreach Director at St. Luke A.M.E. Church, who will be co-moderating this session with me. Just to bring it as a welcome and introduction, I think we all recognize that health is more than simply the absence of disease, but includes the mental, physical, as well as spiritual well-being of individuals and communities. So that's what we're hoping to discuss today, that how we can partner with faith-based leaders and faith-based organizations to improve the health of our community members. And so I'd like to pass the torch to Ms. Anita Parker, who will be saying a prayer, and then we'd like to invite Dr. Bashir to also offer a prayer to launch this event.
Giving honor to God, who's the head of my life, Father God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the gathering of the community of faith and other participants who are joining us today, God. We know that you are the creator and all things is done in your will. And we ask you to guide this discussion and remember that we are here to serve you and to serve the people. Amen. In loving memory of our Norma husband, we will take a moment of silence. She was a partner with us in the beginning, and she would be here today if God did not call her home. And I would like to take a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Bashir, if you'd like to offer a prayer.
Yes, I'm going to offer Surah 103 from the Holy Quran, and it's entitled Al-As, which in English means the time. I will render it in Arabic, and then I will go through the English translation, if that's okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal-Asr, innal insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr. Reads like this in English. Verily, by the token of time, surely humanity is indeed in loss, except for those who believe and do good deeds, and counsel one another in the truth, and counsel one another in patience. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Bashir.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to invite Pastor Frazier to get us started on this conversation with just sharing with us what is the role of a faith-based organization in health promotion activities. And perhaps you could speak about, who faith leaders are and some examples of faith-based organizations in action to promote health.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question, and so much gratitude for the institutions that have collaborated to make this event happen and to be in this particular dialogue. I feel like the role of faith-based organizations in health promotion is three-pronged. I feel like the first for me is to minimize the stigma of seeking out health care resources, particularly when it comes to mental health, which is my area. I think the second role is also to be a bridge for holistic care and connecting people to not only medical institutions, but also holistic practitioners, whether who are involved in doing body work and alternative ways of healing, as well as to support people in being aware of health disparities, particularly in communities that are under-resourced. I am remembering a story of why I got into the work of in looking at the intersections of mental health and being a minister. I was serving as a chaplain resident at a level 1 trauma center in Atlanta, Georgia, and happened to have a patient on my surgery ICU unit that we were in conversation about at an interdisciplinary team meeting. And this gentleman who was 23 years old, African-American male, decided to castrate himself, attempted to castrate himself because of his inability to allow his sexuality and spirituality to coexist. And I found in sitting with this young man that he felt like God was calling him to be a eunuch. And for me, I had no idea about mental health presentations, but he was also hallucinating and feeling like he was seeing a eunuch outside of his window. And it was at that point that I recognized that my skill set as a chaplain and as a minister in pastoral care was not enough. And I went to social work school to be a better spiritual leader because I needed some more practical tools to support the people that I believe that I am called to serve. And so I can think of my recent post in terms of faith-based organizations that are involved in health promotion right at First Corinthian Baptist Church in Central Harlem, as the former associate pastor of congregational care and wellness, where I supported our lay leaders in going through a curriculum that I developed called Becoming a Trauma-Informed Church, because oftentimes our lay leaders are the first responders to a myriad of crises that may happen within ecclesial communities and faith organizations. And I thought that it would be appropriate to add an additional support to the mental health first aid trainings that look like a very interactive way to support our folks in role playing and picking out scenarios that I had been involved in the church to see how we might engage more effectively, how we can participate in de-escalating crises, to understand more the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety, how to resist re-traumatization, even when we're in our church spaces and we are a hugging community. But what does it mean to ask for consent? What does it mean to engage someone who is possibly considering suicide and not be I guess encumbered by your own anxieties, because you have some tools to know how to engage and have that conversation. I'm also remembering the necessity as faith-based organizations commit to health promotion to be a space where really all are welcome. I think it's one thing to say it and actually another thing to actually be a space that where you can feel it when you walk into the doors. I had a wonderful experience in 2019 while serving as the founding executive director of the Hope Center, which is a free mental health facility in Harlem connected to First Corinthian Baptist Church, where a young man was in a moment where he came in very intoxicated and high, had used some substances that he hadn't used before, and came to the Hope Center because he said, I knew that I could come and I wouldn't be judged. And to be able to be that space that someone could come to because they recognize that we're attached to a faith institution that is very trusted in the community, that they would experience a place where they could simply be as they came down, was tremendous for me, and the effectiveness that faith-based organizations can have when it comes to promoting health.
Thank you so much for sharing those powerful stories. You know, I was struck by several things that you said. First, I think you pointed out that faith-based organizations and faith leaders often serve as a very safe and trusted partner in the community. And so that is a unique skill set that I think that we need to recognize, that we could work together as partners to really benefit the health and wellness of individuals and communities, because faith-based organizations are that safe space, as you mentioned, and that they are often the first responders, as you point out. So I think that there are ways that we can have knowledge exchanges to empower our colleagues and partners with the skills that they need to tackle some of these difficult issues. But I think that, you know, these issues often carry a lot of stigma, and you as a faith leader are well positioned to address that. I wanted to invite some of our other panelists to comment on what Pastor Frazier said, if you wanted to add to that, in terms of, you know, the role that the faith-based organization and leader takes in terms of promoting health. Dr. Matthews, did you want to add something?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this space, as Pastor Frazier just mentioned, the space for us to be able to come together as a community and share and you know, share with regards to how we as faith-based organization promote health within our communities. And I want to say that faith-based organizations, we are missionaries, in that we spread messages, good news, and that we also provide aid to communities through these lenses. So faith-based organizations, we are a great ally for health promotion activities. You know, we can reach underserved, under-resourced communities that's experiencing any type of health disparities and health inequities, which we have all seen, you know, through this pandemic that was brought to the forefront during COVID-19 pandemic. Faith-based organizations are also on the front lines during these crises. They are what we call, or what the state call, essential workers, right? We provide community members with access to health information, both mental, as Pastor Frazier mentioned, and physical. We supply food to communities in needs, as well as members in need. During the pandemic, St. John's Baptist Church, and as well as many other churches and mosques throughout the boroughs, opened their doors to provide food to community members. We saw that there was a food desert. There's many communities, many members that didn't have access to food. A lot of the stores were closed, and the ones that were open, food was limited. So we opened our doors to provide food to the community. We served food, as well as provide PPE supplies to residents who needed masks, hand sanitizers, soap, etc. So we are the true missionaries in this community. We are gatekeepers. We are who community members rely on, you know, in times of crisis. So that's my input.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Maybe we'll ask Dr. Bashir to give his input on those questions, and also, you know, what do you think that health professionals and the medical enterprise need to know if they're interested in community engagement? And if you wanted to address any of the previously posed questions as well.
Well, I come from a community that has a different experience than what my two colleagues had mentioned, because a woman could go in for social services, but because she's wearing a kimal, something like that, she's treated as other, and services are not forthright in terms of dealing with her needs. I've looked at the healthcare situation from a historical perspective. Like I had mentioned the other day, that many people are aware of the book of Medical Apartheid. Medical apartheid still exists for many people in our community because the services that are given are inadequate. The services are usually dictated without a community response from the people who work in the community, as my two colleagues had mentioned. And because of that, there is a gap that still exists and needs to be filled. We also have an issue in terms of health in terms of crime. We have trafficking going on in many of the urban communities that's not being addressed. Domestic violence is a healthcare issue. It's not being addressed. We work with men in terms of batterers intervention, teaching men other ways to present their issues of dissatisfaction, so forth and so on, in a more sociable way. And where does the healing begin? For instance, I've been on many panels like this, and their idea of healthcare was that you go to a doctor and you get some pills or a remedy, and then someone sends you home. But we don't look at the many tropes that lead to mental health conditions. One of the papers that I did as a graduate student at CCNY was they asked the question, why don't Black people report they have migraine headaches? Migraine headaches is often something that you just can't take a pill for and it goes away. You need to see a doctor, really, with some kind of skills in terms of what's going on through the central nervous system, so forth and so on. But when you check the history of African Americans in this country, they frequently had what they call shape-up job. You go there, somebody picks you. If you're not there on a frequent basis, you don't get picked. So a person who had a migraine headache and was trying to support their family would go and try to work and do the work, whatever it was, picking cotton or whatever, even though they had a severe headache. How did they deal with that headache? Many of them took to self-medication, be it drugs, alcohol, or whatever. And because of the pain that they were in, there was a connection with that with suicidal behavior, also depression, and other diagnosable maladies that happen as a result of a major health issue that exploded into minor health issue. The mosque that I'm in right now, they fed almost 2,000 people from June to September. Not only that, they gave school supplies. A lot of the kids that's in our community didn't have school supplies. That included book bags, notebooks, pencils, things of that nature. Then, because the people said they didn't have coats for the winter, this masjid, it's a small masjid. MSNBC didn't come and interview us for our charitable work, but we did it anyway. We supplied clothing, coats, gloves, boots for people who didn't have this through this pandemic. And there's an educational series that was going on trying to reach out to people in the community and let them know what COVID-19 really was. Most of the advertisement was saying, come get a shot, come get a shot. And there's a lot of resistance against that because of prior mismanagement, I'll put it that way, of medical concerns. They would tell people to come get this and they needed that. And they would be doing disastrous experiments. I'm quite sure you'll know what I'm talking about. And it went far beyond just the Tuskegee experiment. So one of the things that I've gotten from the conversation is so far is that we still have a tremendous amount of work to do in our communities because the first thing about healthcare has to be about educating the people who may be the consumers of this healthcare. I think there's a big gap between what the medical profession has to offer and what the people in the community know about that offering. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Bashir, for your perspective and reminding us that, you know, the historical roots of mistrust of the medical enterprise are still alive and well. And I think as medical providers, we need to recognize that and be aware of it as we're treating vulnerable individuals. But also, I think you pointed out the myriad of activities that faith-based organizations carry out in order to benefit one's health, including education and outreach. And so that dovetails nicely into the next question I wanted to ask Reverend Minson is, who are faith leaders and how can they facilitate conversations about sensitive health topics? I think we've been working together about brain health and recognizing that, in certain communities, issues relating to brain health or Parkinson's is one thing we've been talking about, is simply not discussed. But how can faith leaders maybe take those conversations forward? And if you could share your insights about health promotion.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw and Miss Anita Parker. I refer to her Sister Parker. We are members of the same church. And I'm what an honor it is to be in this panel with a distinguished panelist as well. And to your question, as a minister, also a former pastor, who are faith leaders, I think that oftentimes when we think of that subject, we want to, our mind tries to go to someone who has a national or international platform that can do these things. But the faith leaders that are closest to the people are those who are pastors or ministers of churches, imams in our communities. These are the individuals who are closest to the people and have the best tools to project health promotion in our disadvantaged communities. Certainly at St. Luke, one thing that we do coming from the South, which wasn't a very common thing, certainly when I left there about a decade, around a decade ago, is this discussion about sexual health. For instance, making sure people have access to, condoms and other things, that we're talking about these issues, because these HIV and these other diseases are prevalent in our communities because we don't talk about it. And unfortunately, we've taught that if we don't talk about it, then no one will do it, when the exact opposite is true. So we as faith leaders have to be bold and intentional about talking about these issues with respect to our communities. And the best way that we move forward with that is being honest with our communities. Serving as a pastor, I think that one thing we learn when we think about health, we have to think about health holistically. Sometimes we think about the things that we eat, we think about exercise, but we often forget about the mental aspect of health. And that is something that is indeed a very, very, we're getting a little bit of feedback, so we'll pause until that goes away.
Can everyone mute their mics, please?
Amen. So, well, and one thing that we certainly did learn is that mental health is something that is very much that challenges our community. And in particular, from my context of Black church, to be a parishioner in the Black church is to deal with trauma. To grow up and to be Black in this country is to live in trauma. And from the context of the Black church, that has been where people have gone to escape the trauma that we have endured in our societies, that we've gone there for refuge. And we give it different names, but it's in fact an issue of mental health. And that's something that we just have to put more focus on and talking about that. And I'm grateful to Dr. Shaw and to Ms. Parker for allowing us to do that. We've done some symposiums on mental health to allow people to think about it in a new way, in a different way, so that we can reach out to people, because mental health affects people from the youngest to the oldest in our community. And until we deal with that, we're going to continue to have problems that go from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. And I think it's important for us to try to deal with it now so that we can deal with these issues in a way that heals us, as opposed to continuing to pass along hurt, pain, and misunderstanding. And that includes all faith communities, whether we're Jewish, whether we're Muslim, whether we're Christian, whether we're non-believing. I think we all have to work together to make sure we're doing all that we need to do to help our communities.
Thank you, Reverend Minson, excuse me.
Very fun.
You know, and I think that you brought up really great points about kind of stopping the silence that's around a lot of these issues, in particular mental health issues, brain health issues that aren't discussed. And so just bringing that to the forefront and creating an environment where people feel comfortable having those conversations and asking those questions. So I'd like to pose a question to the whole panel in terms of, you know, how can health professionals and faith-based organizations best work together? And also in this effort to collaborate on health issues, how can various religious institutions come together for the community? What resources do faith organizations need? And what skill sets maybe do we need to come together to gain?
I would say that there should be mutual, mutual understanding and respect and of the role that each party plays, the role of the FBO, the faith-based organization. They often recognize and greatly appreciate the expertise of the healthcare professionals who come into the community. However, the health professionals or clinicians, they must also respect the expertise of the FBOs, the faith-based organization, in that they know their communities very well, and that many of them are also professionals. You know, they work in the field. Some of them are educators, healthcare workers, business workers, etc. So they're not just faith communities or faith members, but they have work and knowledge as well, that with both coupled with the clinician who's coming into the community and their background, their expertise as faith leaders, they make great allies. And also to take time to visit a faith-based organization during either a time of their worship service or an event that they are having, to get to know the members, get to know them and have them know you. This type of mutual relationship is beneficial, and it develops a relationship and a sense of trust between both parties.
Absolutely. I think that recognizing the expertise and skill set of faith-based organizations is critical to building partnerships that have a longevity to work together to tackle some of these complicated and difficult problems. Please, Dr. Bashir, go ahead.
I agree with Sister Matthews had stated. One of the things that makes me feel that many of the organization, I think she touched on it, but I'm going to take it a little deeper. Many of the organizations want the expertise of clinicians in the community for free, you know, and I really don't understand why they're asking people to come there, donate time, which we have done for years with no compensation. When I was attending Columbia, you know, they paid me to go there, and I would give presentations. I got honorariums of $500. I know they have the money, but it's always a thing about, you know, we're not recognized fully as professionals. We're looked upon as just a bunch of people who want to volunteer and things of that nature. And I think Sister Matthews hit on that point, and I'm just extending it a little further. I would view a serious commitment to the clinicians in the community if they were reimbursed for their time, at least, you know, not just a token to get on the subway and come down. These are professional people. I've looked at the resume of all of my colleagues here, and they're outstanding. And still, no one will say, well, let's treat them like they are professionals and reimburse them for their time. That's what most doctors, social workers, lawyers, and whatnot, that's what you pay for their time, because time has a price. And people are doing this hard work without any reimbursement. I think that going back to community organizations that want to fill the gap that we have in terms of professional health has to really look at the financial aspect also.
Agree, Dr. Bashir. I actually was going to say that. But I also want to add that as researchers and clinicians, don't just come into the community to gather information, but also leave the community with a skill so that they can become more informed and they can educate themselves and others. And also include them at the table, invite them to the table to get feedback and suggestions for health interventions. You know, we know the communities very well. Hire staff also who looks like the community, you know, when you are working with them. Hire people who look like whoever it is that you're trying to reach. You know, that's what I just wanted to add that piece. But really, that piece with the skill set, that's something valuable. You know, we had at St. John's Baptist Church, we had a couple years ago, we had different interventions. We partnered with Columbia University on I think it's a it's an In Touch. The church partnered with Columbia University, and they provided a curriculum to the members where they learned a skill set. They learned how to do blood pressure reading. They learned how to, you know, do little finger stick for diabetes testing. It was a long, I think a 6-week curriculum, and they trained them, and they were able to not only learn as an individual, but they were able to take the skill set out into the community when they're having health events. They didn't need to necessarily reach out to a health facility to be able to come out to provide blood pressure screening or this finger stick test. The members themselves knew how to do it. So they were able to do it at health fairs. They were even able to do it after church on a Sunday, you know, have a little health initiative, and church members were able to you know, come downstairs and get a finger stick, you know, get their blood pressure read. And so that is a valuable skill set that members from the healthcare clinicians can share with community faith leaders.
Okay, maybe I was not clear. I wasn't talking about people in the community gaining some expertise in some area. I'm talking about the experts that's already in the community that has built up a residue of trust by working in the community, sacrificing their time, some of them to the point that they may have left gaps in terms of their families to go out and do work for their community. I'm talking about if they are considered experts in that area, like any other experts, I think that they should have some kind of financial reimbursement for their time if this is a serious endeavor, because I got $500 from Columbia just to speak for 1 hour. So I know they got the money. Now I like to know about the distribution of some of that to some of my people here that's talking, who have gone to all kinds of schools, and I know they had to pay for it. Maybe they got a partial scholarship or something like that, but they have the expertise, and people want to tap into that expertise, but they want to treat them like they're people that just came off the street. And as you see the resume of everybody here, they made a serious commitment to whatever expertise they decided to go in. And I think that needs to be recognized on a professional level.
Agree. Agree. I was talking about a different issue as well. I agree, and I understand that. I'm also talking about when healthcare clinicians come into the community, in addition to that stipend piece, as well as recognizing the skill set of members of these faith-based organizations, not as volunteers, but as actual experts in the field and compensated. That's a totally different thing. I'm talking also about when you come into—
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about experts being recognized as experts and being treated as experts.
Exactly. But when they also come into for example, I'm saying the church, leave them with some type of skill set so that they can also empower their church or their faith-based organization and their community members.
Well, they had a truck that used to go around and it would check for HIV, AIDS, blood pressure. What was your blood pressure? A lot of people didn't know that blood pressure is a silent killer. You may not have any outward signs, but you may be over the top in terms of your blood pressure. I myself was a victim of that until they called me in for Agent Orange, which I got in Vietnam. I served 2 years there. I didn't know. My blood pressure was like 190 over 170, some crazy numbers. The nurse was shocked. She called the doctor. They immediately took me in the VA hospital down on 23rd Street and First Avenue in Manhattan. There are a lot of things that people don't know that still we have to do the work and invite people in so they can get basic health care. Healthcare has been ignored in many of our communities since 400 years ago. So it's not considered a routine thing. People usually think about going to the doctor when they're in fear of dying. Then they said, okay, I got to go to the doctor, because the medical profession has been quite abusive in the Black community, as Eugene had mentioned, and there has built up a tremendous resistance that people like my colleagues and myself are trying to unpack.
One of the things, if I may interject at this time, that as the professionals come into the community, clinicians, and give the service, we also, as trusted members in the faith community, need some additional skills in regards if they could train. Someone may see the doctor there with us standing. They won't go to that doctor, but they know that I'm there and they look, okay, I do, they will go and get their blood pressure checked.
Right.
We have had doctors come in from different hospitals doing blood screenings, blood pressure check, but the member of the church had to be present, in touch, which at St. Luke A.M.E. Church, we had several of our members trained, and they are professionals, but they still went through In Touch because they was part of the church. Mm-hmm. And they got paid, for whatever service they did in the community outside of the church. But again, I agree with people, professionals being paid for the time they give and do, but also service. I believe in service as a missionary, as a faith-based leader, and for God be the glory. I'm going to do what I have to do to make sure our people get the service we need. And still, we have financial obligations of our own, but we must look at, if they won't do it for us, we got to do it for ourselves and fight for that. And I think that's where we're looking at right now. What can the clinician or professional like Columbia or the institution can help us and pay people at a decent salary, like the professionals in our congregation, in the community, and get them involved.
So I think that you're both, and others have talked about that if we're to have a true partnership, there has to be mutual respect and acknowledgement of the skills that everyone brings. And I think that is in part demonstrated by a financial commitment to one's time and energy and efforts. But the other thing I think that we keep hearing throughout this symposium is the issues of mistrust and hesitancy with the medical enterprise, given the historical roots of that mistrust. So I wanted to ask the panelists, and perhaps Pastor Frazier, you could enlighten us, but how do faith-based organizations address these issues of mistrust and hesitancy, particularly in light of the work that you've done? What are the specific tools that faith-based organizations use to educate and address those tough to tackle topics?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question. And I want to echo everything that Lisa and Dr. Bashir have said. I think that faith-based organizations tackle the mistrust by really having honest conversation with the institutions that seek partnership and with each other. I cannot do this work of mental health advocacy and offer services without talking about structural racism that is very much present, as Dr. Bashir said, in the medical system still, where you have Black men who are either overdiagnosed or misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, often because their emotionality is seen as psychotic. You have Black women who are experiencing postpartum depression and usually don't have access to proper treatment. You have 50% of youth, Black youth, who are 50 times more likely, at least, to present with signs and symptoms of bulimia and can have the same exact symptoms as their white counterparts and are not diagnosed at all. And so these issues have to be talked about. I think cultural humility and cultural competency comes with relationship building. And I think oftentimes institutions attempt to partner and do the work collectively without building relationship, and relationship takes time. I just submitted a grant recently through Gilead Sciences Faith Coordinating Center at Wake Forest University, Divinity School, since I am now here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where this is my hometown. I moved from New York last year, and so it's good to be back home, but recognizing that faith-based organizations, particularly within the African diaspora, so I'm thinking about organizations that are in the Islamic community, organizations that are in the Jewish community that are Black, organizations that are in the Ifa or Risha tradition, an African traditional religious institution, as well as Black progressive Christian voices and traditional Christian voices. We don't do the work to know each other. I think that structural racism has done a number on Black folks mistrusting each other when it comes to how the multitude of ways that we engage faith. And so looking at transformative storytelling through listening sessions to really be able to do the work of building relationship. And I think that that's what needs to happen with these medical institutions, that we have to do the work of building relationship. It can't simply just be doing the work. There has to be some social emotional investment that we all have in supporting humanity and in evolving.
Wow, thank you for those powerful words. Dr. Matthews, Reverend Minson, Dr. Bashir, would you like to add to that?
I agree 100%. And that's why I always advocate for a multi-faith approach, not just Muslims and Christians and Jews. I invite Hindu partners, Jain partners, Sikh partners, unfortunately, who was mistaken for Muslims, and a lot of them paid a heavy price for that mistake. And as I stated, I try to have an inclusive thing, because many of us are facing the same social ills in our community. But to give you an example, we just went through a period with the brother that died in Minneapolis. And then because of what somebody said, a lot of hate was directed to the Asian community. So what did Congress do? Congress makes a separate law to stop Haitian violence, instead of making a law outlawing violence totally. They said, well, Haitians shouldn't be this, Haitians shouldn't do that, and Haitians shouldn't do the other. But there's a number of communities right now, the Black community, the Latino, Latinx community is facing this, and they make a law, they keep making separate laws for a segment of the population instead of making an inclusive law. If you look at domestic violence, they had the VAWA Act. The VAWA Act said, oh, if you come down and you smack this woman, we're going to prosecute you. Unfortunately, the law sounded nice, but they never enacted the law in actuality. It was just something on the books. The other thing is, if I walk down the street and I smack somebody, I would be held for an assault. Why do I need a special law for women who got smacked? The same should apply. If you smack anybody, you should be held for assault. But when they put a set-aside law, this is only for women. and then they don't enforce that law, they still lead that group, that specialized group that they had, still lead them in the danger zone. And people celebrate when Congress said we passed the law, but we need to celebrate when Congress begins to enforce these laws, which they are not doing. So that's one of my points. And I applaud Sister Frazier for what she said. We don't have this intercommunication or interactional communication going on between a lot of the communities, because there's always an upmanship type of thing. I'm going to lead because I have more members. I'm going to lead because I'm this faith. I'm going to lead because I'm that faith. Instead of let's all lead together. One of the things I do with youth is that I have a leadership training program for them, so they can learn to work together. I think I need to bring this program to the adults now, after Sister Kendra had mentioned it. So I think at some point, we have to learn to really work together without all the political shenanigans that's going on and without the control of politicians. Clinical groups are usually, clinicians as a rule, don't work with authority figures, In fact, a lot of times they're despised by authority figures because they have a different view. But we have to get to the point that we can talk with leaders and also present our view without feeling that because you're a political leader that you have some kind of rank over me, because I'm rejecting secularist approaches to working with people, and I'm dealing with more humanity because I have a higher authority to answer to.
And if I may interject, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that the current rash of violence against particularly Asian Americans is reprehensible. And it is unfortunate that we are passing piecemeal laws to deal with it, as opposed to an equal rights amendment, which is constantly stalled in our national government, and largely because of institutional religion. Because they don't want to see LGBTQ plus people protected. They have issues in terms of women and how that's going to affect patriarchy. So there are a lot of issues for which we as faith leaders have to speak truth to power in our own faith traditions in that regard. So again, these kind of platforms are also helpful in that regard, so that we can speak to that. Right. So faith-based organizations, I think that we are on the right path. We're talking about it. I think that talking about it can't be the beginning and the end. What are we going to do once we have these discussions? Right. What actions are we going to put in place? What are our Black churches that have faced violence based on our color? What are we going to say about the violence against Asian bodies? What are we going to say against violence against Indigenous bodies? What are we going to say against violence against LGBTQ plus bodies? What are we going to say about violence against Muslim bodies, Jewish bodies, so on and so forth? So we have to bring all this under one umbrella and say that if there's something done against someone else, another marginalized group is done against all of us, and we have to, raise those marginalized voices, take them out of the shadows and bring them to the center, and say that we hear you, we love you, we support you, and just to prove to you that it's just not words. These are the things that we're doing. This is what we are doing to support you. So I think that is something that we need to do a better job as, just being, putting some action plans together to be a voice, understanding that that is going to inevitably create some strife within organized religions in some sectors, not in all sectors, but we have to be prepared for the fact that we're going to step on some toes of individuals who believe that that's too progressive, or that's going too far, and that's often what we face when we're trying to do the work in our communities.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to ask our participants if anyone has any questions to please put them in the chat. We do have one question already, which we can start with as others gather their thoughts. So from Dalton Haskins, they write, after establishing the relationship with the community, how do you teach the family the signs and symptoms of mental health issues? There is serious denial that many family members have. There are also problems in the Department of Education system of an inability to recognize problems that go on and on for years. How do we address these issues? So if any of the panels could take on, how do faith-based organizations teach families about mental illness and how to take steps to get those people linked and connected to the right services?
I like to digress to what Brother Eugene said about speaking to all bodies as opposed to separating, one body from the group, as was done, the divide and conquer type of thing. There has to be a difference in training or teaching from elementary school on up. We have people who are indoctrinated with domestic violence at the age of 3. I'll give you an example. There was a party for one of my grandkids, right? And I had a box of donuts, cupcakes from the bakery. Some of them were chocolate, some of them was vanilla, and some of them was strawberry, So one was brown, one was white, and one was pink. And I have my youngest grandson is this laid back, cool guy, he never like runs with the crowd, he's an independent guy. So everybody had grabbed the cupcakes, and he came in maybe about an hour later and he says, Pop, I didn't have a cupcake. Could you give me a cupcake? So I just reached in the box, gave him a cupcake. And he looked at me and he said, well, I can't eat this. And I said, why not? It's a cupcake. He said, this is pink. I said, yeah. So what about pink? He said, you don't know pink is for girls, Pop? He was like incredulous that I didn't know this. And I said, well, where did you learn that at? He said, everybody knows that, Papa. This cat was only 3 years old. And I said, wow, So there is subliminal patriarchal themes being taught at an early age. So we wait till somebody gets to 20 and they're in a jail for beating up their girlfriend or whatever, or got beat up by their girlfriend. And you're now trying to teach him gender equality, but you have 20 years of built up stuff that you have to displace before you can get to the balance of equality. We need to have new looks at what is mental health, what is social health, and things of that nature, because we're always behind the 8 ball, because when we talk to a person that is in jail for domestic violence and whatnot, he's had 20, 30, 40 years. I'm not saying to discard him and say you can't teach old dogs new trick, but the longer this malady goes on, the more intensive the therapy has to be. I work with men. I've been working with men since 1981. And, sometimes it make my head spin on my neck, some of the things people come up with. So we need to do that in terms of mental health. I just got an article last night where they stated that infant mortality among Black women is higher now than what it was in slavery. And they had the percentage in the charts and all this kind of stuff. That to me is unbelievable. And one of the clinicians, a Black woman, stated that some of the hair products that women are using are causing disruption clinically, biochemically and stuff like that, because some of the stuff they were putting in the hair products, they put in explosive ordinances. What kind of mind came up with that solution for hair care? I don't know. So we really have to look at all of this. Thank you.
Yes.
all understand that mental health is a big issue in society, a big issue in the Black community, and a big stigma within the churches, the mosque, etc. So one of the things that St. John's Baptist Church did, along with a partnership with St. Luke's A.M.E. Church, we partnered with the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene on a mental health training program. I think it's Thrive NYC. We partner with them so that we can help to change the narrative and stigma around mental health. Our members all came out on a Saturday and they participated in an 8-hour training, which they learned how to identify and assist someone who's experiencing a mental health experiencing mental health distress. And the training was culturally tailored to the faith community. They used different scenarios with regards to the church, the mosque. They really incorporated and acknowledged the importance of faith and prayer with regards to mental health, but also they left the training allowed and I would say church because these were church members. It allowed the church members to recognize that God is a healer, but he also blessed us with doctors. So doctors to be able to address mental health issue. You can combine your faith and your prayer with the medical field to be able to manage the symptoms of depression and anxiety. And I think that was really, really great. We had a lot of great feedback from St. John's Baptist Church as well as St. Luke's A.M.E. with regards to how this was helpful to the community. It helped them to be able to talk about things that they were experiencing within themselves or even other family members. And we also provided them with resources. We had resources where they can follow up with Thrive NYC, or they can follow up with the local healthcare facility in their neighborhood to be able to obtain mental health care. I think we also provided them with information at, I think it's the Hope Center, Pastor Frazier, at First Corinthians Baptist Church. I'm not sure if it's the same one and the same, but they also partnered up and they were able to receive resources there with, to help them manage and identify some of these signs and symptoms of mental health.
Beautiful. I wonder if you still have that program.
We still have the Thrive NYC is still around, but we at St. John's Baptist Church, we still provide members with resources. We have the resources there that they can access.
I'd like to see that program, really.
Okay. And there's also, they address the veterans. There's a lot, they did adolescents and adults, separate trainings. So, and also the veterans. So that's important, it's there. And we would also like to get you that information. We could collaborate further. But Reverend Minson had mentioned what St. Luke did doing, was last year around August, how we began to look at the issue of mental health. Could you talk about that, Reverend Minson?
Yes, we did, actually went through the training and such for that as well. Just to look for signs as a faith leader, I've learned that that's important for us to look for, especially in our young people. We'll be surprised by the level of mental issues that young people go through. And now that we are now coming out on the other end of COVID-19 and being locked down for a year, I was always concerned about kids not being in school because of that which they would be subjected to while still home. And we are yet to know the horrors that a lot of young people have endured being among adults. And that's something that our faith communities have to be on the lookout for in the coming years, because there's inevitably a lot of trauma, and we have to be able to look at that, not even in our educational system, not stigmatizing them as troublemakers, but these are young people who are doing things to be heard, to be seen, to vent. I was a substitute teacher for a couple of years after graduating college, and I recognized that they didn't, kids don't come to school just to be mischievous or disruptive for the sake of being mischievous and disruptive. There's something behind that, and we have to have that sensitivity and that compassion to be able to listen to people, to direct individuals to the resources that they need, to be able to talk through these things, to get the help that they need, so that they can be productive in whatever settings that they're in, be productive in overall society, and so that they can, from their experiences, once healed and once equipped with the tools to deal with those things, that they can speak to individuals who've been through similar circumstances. I can't speak to individuals who've been there everything because I haven't gone through those things. How do we lift up people and empower them to be the change agents that we need? That it's not just only faith leaders, those of us who have the impressive resumes, but how we're using our lay people also to be those voices in our community, to be those healers, to be those individuals that can pinpoint what's going on. I think that is the important piece of mental health. This is also why we see now, because of the ease by which one can obtain firearms in our country, we see individuals engaging and using weapons against other, by way of guns against people, and why we have so many mass shootings in this country, because people, there's a serious issue with mental health that we have to address. And if we don't address it, people are going to act out in violent ways, unfortunately, until we actually deal with it. And our only answer isn't incarceration or the over-policing of our communities, particularly communities of color, which continues the cycle of trauma, the cycle of mistrust, the cycle of all the things that we're trying to talk about here and deal with. Those are things that we have to talk about and also get our political leaders involved in these discussions. It will be helpful. We have political leaders even involved in these discussions, so that they can make policies that are helpful to communities and not strictly punitive.
Thank you so much. And I think I'm mindful of the time. So it's past 1. I just wanted to say again that, I think we've learned a lot from this conversation, which we hope is just the first of many, about the role of us all as healers, I think, working together in partnership with mutual respect and acknowledging each other's expertise to help the health of individuals and communities. I wanted to again give great thanks to Ms. Anita Parker, Outreach Chair at St. Luke A.M.E. Church, and the church for its support in planning this event, as well as Dr. Lori Quinn and her Neurorehabilitation Lab at Teachers College for helping with organization of this event. And I wanted to give Ms. Parker the opportunity to also add some closing remarks. But from my side, thank you all so much for participating. We thank you, and thank you to all of the panelists.
I want to say to everyone, thank you. It was a start. And Dr. Bashir, we will come together, Reverend Minson, Sister Lisa Matthews, Pastor Frazier. This is the beginning, baby steps. We have a long way to go, and I pray that you will continue to be with us through this process. We are trying very hard to change the paradigm, shift it. We're going to shift this paradigm. We're going to do this. And I'm asking, I thank you very much. And it was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.